Hi, I'm Jess Kravsinski. I'm the instructor for HCI and Usability, and I am going to tell you the results for the usability study conducted on the course in the spring of 2018 using a research diary. So, as students of an HCI and usability course, you will be performing your own usability study, and I'd like to get you thinking about what that might look like. So at the end of the semester, you're going to create a presentation that's somewhat like this one, and I'd just like you to have that mental model of what the end result might look like. So, you've already participated in two activities. One was where you were the participant in a usability study and worked on a research diary, and the other was where you put on that preliminary UX consultant hat and began thinking about the preliminary design evaluation of Canvas. So this only focuses on what you said in that research diary as a whole. So without any further ado, let me get into what this usability study is all about. So UX, or user experience, it's right there in the title, all about experience. So although in the process of asking you to log 3 full days of interactions in Canvas, I might catch some bugs, some things that I could have done better in providing better instructions, realizing that I didn't give really good information about login credentials for getting into the app, that you needed to type in that you weren't part of the University of Cincinnati network, but really the free Canvas accounts network in order to credential in. So things like that are bugs that that I might catch along the way and are useful and absolutely need to be corrected. But those aren't what usability studies will typically focus on. Usually we're interested in trying to find things that are going to help us enhance the design. So let's talk about that experience. So as online learners, I'm going to be very interested in your learning experience, and the main objective for online students is really finding the information that they need in order to be successful in the course and having a good interaction in terms of trying to turn in those assignments. But I will be learning still about other information needs, things that maybe I don't anticipate students really need when they log into the system. So, that's what I'm trying to get at, is learning more about navigation, the overall experience as an online learner. Are you experiencing, joy rather than frustration trying to find what you need to be a successful student? So, research diaries are employed typically to try to fill in gaps where activity data or survey research can't tell a whole story about user interactions when it comes to system navigation. So I employed this particular method as a way to complement the activity data that I already have through Canvas. So I already know, the number of clicks that pages get. I know, how frequently students are using the system. Another form of activity data is just whether or not assignments were turned in. There was a gap, in your first couple weeks. I gave you ample time to complete your first assignment and asked you to just spend some time trying to get to know Canvas, and also giving students plenty of time to just get registered in Canvas. And so just seeing students appear in the system, get registered, complete that first assignment, that's all really good activity data as well. It's in terms of usability, students made it there, so that would be, very baseline though. Above, having that activity data, I can do a research study on asking you about your experience and rating it on Likert scales, whether, kind of getting at satisfaction. But I wanted a little bit more robust information because I'm still you know, if I don't know what kinds of questions I have, you know, in order to put on a Likert scale, or, you know, these sort of scales from, you know, very dissatisfied to completely satisfied, I might want to get more information about the kinds of things that I might then go and get some survey research for. So I can start with interviews, focus groups, or something like a research diary, which is going to give me really robust information from log in to log out about the experience that a person had and what was most notable within that experience. So that's why I selected the method that I did. And so here's the overview. So this is a classroom diary study. As you know, you are an online course of graduate students at the University of Cincinnati in the MSIT program. And there's about 40 students in this class, and you are asked to log Canvas interactions for 3 full days. Although you were given a very wide period of time, and you know, were given very open instructions about when you would begin and end that. And I did add in the prompt to log into Canvas. I encouraged everybody to begin those Canvas interactions by sending out the diary study early. So that research diary template that everyone was sent. So it was a Word document, and it was sort of these tables, and asked students to provide some timestamps, both the times that they logged in. If they were prompted by Canvas, I asked for that time, so that would give a sense of if they logged in, you know, because they were prompted by Canvas. And by noting the time of the prompt, maybe getting a sense of how long it took, you know, between the time that the prompt was sent out, say an email or an announcement, or something that Canvas sent, how long before the student actually went to the system. It asked about the interaction type, so why they logged on, what device was used, and were they prompted by email or an assignment that they knew there was a deadline for already, and then where that interaction took place, homework, school, etc. And then students were asked to talk about, or write 2 to 3 sentences about their general feelings towards that each Canvas interaction situated within the experience. So, you know, writing up this timestamp and the interaction, and then saying a little bit about, you know, what were you feeling as you looked for that assignment, as you answered the email, etc. And the last bit, you know, is really focused on that navigation. So a description of the path that was used to complete the interaction from log in to log off. And all of the instructions were within this template. So at the end of the template, I did provide a couple little prompts to just say, or give students an opportunity to give a little bit of feedback on the diary study, whether or not they thought it was complete, that they were able to focus on their interactions, what prompts were the most and least useful. And so part of that was, one, to encourage some reflection just on this methodology and how complete it was, which is good to do. The more usability studies you're a part of, the better you get at designing usability studies. But the other part of that, say this was a pilot study, that would be integral for me being able to revise this diary study and say, if I were to do this all over again, what would I do differently? So those prompts gave me a little bit more feedback than just that. So, you know, the first thing that I'm going to tell you about is that average experience of the user. So what were they doing, where were they, when, and how did they do it? So in some of the reflections, I got a little bit more about that average experience. And so here's a couple representative quotes. So in some of that general feedback, I did hear from some students, or one student in particular said, I don't believe that the general feelings surrounding my interactions were particularly helpful. but that's just from my point of view. Maybe there's something that you're looking for there. So this person maybe felt a little bit aimless in their diary interactions. They were writing things down, but kind of thought, I don't know if I'm if I'm contributing to anything here. I'm just saying what I did. And I would reply with that it's very helpful to the usability of the person that's trying to draw some insights about design, especially when combined with the rest of the responses. Another thing that was said, which was very positive to me as an instructor, so I appreciate it, but another person said, I found that being able to reflect on my experiences with this tool thus far has allowed me to really understand all of the possible utilities available for this course within the Canvas website application. It's not just about mindlessly using the application, but about getting the most out of it and the class, and being able to do this really helps. So these are two different things. So, and we need to keep in mind that during any usability study, your participants can easily feel this way. So I've had many users who say, I'm sorry, I don't think that I gave you anything. And so it's really important to make sure that the setup of whatever study you're doing sort of talks about the goals and what you're trying to get out of it. Because a lot of people want to give you good information as soon as they commit to volunteer. They're trying to help you out in some way. Another thing to keep in mind is that there are a lot of participants where you might not feel like you're giving somebody anything, like, you're not necessarily giving them a gift card or, a couple dollars for their time or t-shirt. But among many studies that I've conducted, I found that people generally enjoy reflecting on their daily practices, and there's just a lot of situations in life where we're constantly on the go, and having the moment to sit down and think about what it is we do and reflect can sometimes be a very enjoyable experience for some people, as long as you're not getting into sensitive information. It depends on the type of study you're doing. So in a past life, I did, work with health problems, and so that's obviously maybe not always a positive experience to reflect on. But since transitioning to usability studies, usually it's a lot more fun to talk about possible changes in technology, although sometimes you're getting hammered with some really, if you created the system, you hear about the bad things you did, you have to keep an open mind to that too. In industry, these are two different people, the UX and the developers. Okay, so now let's transition to talking about the usage, both by the time and by the device. So you'll see across the rows, I have types of devices, and across the columns, you'll see the time of day. So there's a couple across the time of day. I've sort of separated this by morning, noon, and night, and these are not very scientific periods of time, but let's just call morning anything before 11 a.m., noon being sometime right around the lunch hour until the end of the afternoon, and night being anything after 4 p.m. So maybe thinking about the workday and cutting it up in this way. And then there's a few individuals that forgot to include a timestamp. Depending on the purposes of your study, you might throw out those observations. It depends on how important it was to you to know the time of day that people were logging activities. And by device, I've split it into campus/work computers. So this category is interesting because for a lot of places of employment, especially within the greater Cincinnati area, these are going to be places, one, that have firewalls that may, sometimes that creates some different hiccups with systems, but we'll probably have a very reliable, stable, fast internet connection, especially on campus, where we have, about 100 to 90 megabits per second, depending on what time of day you're using it. A personal computer might be slower, might be on the go. It might have different constraints. So there's that. And then smartphones. So there is the mobile application that it can be installed natively for Canvas. And some individuals also mentioned just using their smartphone to log in or check a notification. So there's some trends here. So right off the bat, we can see that the personal computer was the device that was most frequently used for coursework, logging 87 interactions through the personal computer in total. So the personal computer, I should say, there were 129 interactions logged by 40 students, and so students were asked to log 3 full days of activity. The template included 3 interactions, and so we might expect that a student might only interact with Canvas once per day, especially if this is the only class that you're using Canvas in. And so the minimum was 3. Nobody reported less than 3, which was good. The maximum that I saw was 5 interactions, and so the average was about 3.25 interactions per student. And so as you can see, mostly on the personal computer and mostly at night. So there were quite a few students who may have had 1 or 2 activities in the morning where they just got up and were doing their regular routine. They may have noticed an email, a notification, something, or just wanted to take a glance. But noon was another, slowly climbing in the number of students going into the system, but night was most popular. So if I was only interested in time of day, I probably would only use activity data for the system. I don't necessarily need to do a diary study to find this out. If I was doing a psychological study, I could actually compare this to the activity data. So students, for the most part, were pretty honest. Some, said that they, were on Canvas at 3 in the morning, 1 in the morning, and I appreciated that. There's other students where maybe they mostly logged morning or noontime activities, but I do see most of their submissions in the wee hours of the morning or night, and so I could compare these things. We do find that with a lot of surveys or diary studies that even if people really do feel that they're being honest, sometimes people will say, what all good people will say, also, that I'm your instructor who will be reading this. So I did not, so everyone knows, I don't have the kind of time to compare your interactions with your diary or your research diary. But just to reflect on that, I do want to say, so this might have been a mismatch if it was my only goal. So some of the other things that may have been more interesting to learn was that the Canvas app was the least used medium. So you can see that in that, if we go back to our layout here, there were only 20 interactions total that were logged within a smartphone. But the students that do report using the app report using the app for multiple interactions. There was a couple students who reported all their interactions within the app. But most students don't report using it at all. So this wasn't necessarily intermittent, where somebody had 3 interactions and 2 were in a computer and 1 was in a smartphone app. Another reflection was that despite there being, lots of reasons to have a mobile application for things, or, even having a digital system, that a lot of students still reported going into this, or not, I wouldn't say the majority, but there were quite a few students that did mention putting things into paper. Like, for example, I had changed a deadline of something, and there were a couple of students who reported they thought they saw the interaction at one point because they had written it down and they wanted to know were they crazy, so maybe I could have gotten away with having changed a deadline slightly from the start of the semester to later, but if it was completely digital, but once it's written down on a piece of paper, that's there. So which I should not do that, and I won't. But that's the or one reflection is just that students do like using paper. A couple different locations reported. So some students reported, or most locations reported either at work, in the office, a cubicle, campus. A lot of these interactions were discussed as trying to fill downtime at the start of the day or the end of the day, at work, during or after lunch. At home, it was either first thing waking up or during homework mode and in the late nights right before deadlines. So as far as why did students, or what was happening during that interaction, 51 of the interactions were just checking in, which is a whole lot. And 34 were completing assignments. So more students recorded interactions discussing checking in than actually completing assignments. And 44 were prompted by a notification, an announcement, or an email, and that was the reason that they came to the system. So the importance of due dates. So all that checking in, a lot of that has to do with due dates. I just wanted to check the due date of the assignment. I wanted to see what was coming up. Trying to figure out what are the assignments and when are they due. So when checking in, or just when going to the system, the features that are mentioned most often are the modules, absolutely, since that's where the layout, what the layout has looked like for this course. So I'm speaking, to you as a group that's an audience that's already familiar with the system. But at current, when you go to the home page in Canvas, you're at the syllabus page. From the syllabus page, you can scroll all the way to the bottom, and you can see a list of all of the upcoming assignments. There's also a to-do list to the side that shows, upcoming assignments or things like that. And then there's also a calendar tab. And so students frequently discuss each of these items. The typical navigation is logging in, perhaps noticing an upcoming assignment that's associated with some upcoming due date, and then doing the thing that they came to do. And that usually is either going to the inbox to communicate or going to the modules tab, navigating to the assignment, clicking on the assignment. It can also be, so the longest click stream is to log in, come to the syllabus page, or to the courses page, from the courses page to the syllabus page, from the syllabus page to modules, and then to the assignment, and then complete the assignment. The fastest navigation pattern was through the calendar. So going to the calendar, seeing the assignment, clicking to the assignment, and arriving at the assignment. So that click stream is 3 steps by using the calendar page versus going all the way through the modules. And there were a number of students that talked about, long click streams. So that most mentioned feature was the calendar page. A lot of students, through their posts kind of talked about early frustrations, or, just getting used to where things are, but as they became more familiar, they enjoyed Canvas more. Obviously, like if this is a system standing between you and your assignments, it will cause more frustration. But once you get used to it, and knowing where information is, that helped. However, some students still felt like maybe things were buried somewhere, still looking for where to find a list of assignments. So based on that feedback, I've iterated on the design. So as I mentioned, the first iteration was that when logging in, the home page, so you can actually never really click on the home page. If I click on that top home, it's actually just going to take me to the syllabus. And from the syllabus, I could see these navigation items: home, the announcements, syllabus, modules, collaborations, which was added a couple weeks into the course after students were assigned to groups for leading class discussion, and the last item is the grades. So in order to find assignments, students either needed to find it in the to-do list, go to the modules page, or scroll to the bottom of the syllabus. So my hope was that by using the modules page, that because every module is organized by a list of, it starts with activities, and so the activities page under the modules lists, the objectives for that class. It lists the readings, and it has some action items or some to-dos. So I was very focused on wanting everyone to navigate to the modules, especially orienting to this, starting out with less rather than more, hoping that you will be able to find the readings, do the readings, and then you get the title of your module, you get to see this activities page that houses all of these great assignments that you have, and then underneath that you see your quiz, and then the lab, and then the podcast gets stuck within that module as soon as it's completed. So this was the first version, and today the home page has been updated. So you can actually click on the home page and it says home, but now the home page takes you to the modules page. The thinking there being that students should now be familiar with the syllabus as we come to the fourth week or fifth week in the course. So it is no longer your first page, and now you see the modules. So I still want to emphasize the modules in the design, but given that some students had, that first changes, you'll see that you come to the modules when you land. But given that some students had felt like they wanted to see, assignments, the other change is that there is now a tab for assignments and quizzes. So you began the course maybe just having to orient to, you started out with 5 options, I gave you 1 more, and now I've incrementally given 2 more, and this is based on some students' reflections that they were interested in being able to navigate a little faster to the, finding those due dates, finding those assignments as quickly as possible. So, in summary, one of the things I'd say is that, prompting students to come to the system. I did mention that there was a number of reasons why they were prompted. My sending emails didn't, or the announcement that didn't make it to anyone's log, that they logged in, specifically after getting that, it was usually different types of emails, but alerts such as the to-do list, inbox grade notifications prompted a lot more actions, more often than in a mass email. Students do tend to log in at night most often. I typically try to send announcements that will go out first thing in the morning, but it is the night that the students are there. So perhaps if I were, if I was trying to capture students in some way that required the fastest attention, maybe I would try to capture them in the night. I could try, sending announcements at night instead of in the morning, since it'll sit there, and maybe it could end up further down in an inbox if I send announcements in the morning. Important to remember that pen and paper is not a dead technology, and the calendar, that assignments, should be associated with due dates so that they'll appear in the calendar. So one activity, leading class discussion, in the beginning of the semester, I did not associate a date with it, so it was appearing all the way at the bottom of the syllabus, and that was because each group, depending on when you signed up to lead class discussion, had a different date associated with it. But I found a way to associate multiple dates, and I did that. So so now that is something that appears in the calendar. The last thing is that I'm now aware that students don't use the app, but the ones that are using the app are using it quite a bit. They tend to enjoy the notifications and just being able to see things quickly. So the limitations, I will always ask that you have a section of the usability study just talking about some of the imperfections or limitations. So to know that these are usability trends that are constrained. So for example, this was a limited sample. It was only students of this class. I couldn't necessarily apply this to all online learners or to undergraduate learners or learners who perhaps aren't working full-time. So a number of students in this class are working full-time, and there are students I did employ some convenience tactics that also limit this. So another thing was that there were some prompts that don't necessarily need to be there. Quite a few students mentioned that they didn't understand why I asked about the timestamp prompt, and I didn't actually end up going ahead and doing any correlations with that. So that was a prompt that definitely did not need to be there. So students had to go back, look up when that timestamp was on an email or some interaction, and then I didn't end up calculating out, I'm sorry, I didn't end up calculating out what the delay was, but that's good data that maybe I'll do something with that later. Also, I didn't ask specifically if they found what they were looking for. Is there still some unmet needs? Or are there other needs that I should have asked about? The other thing I kept asking myself as time ticked on was, why wasn't the deadline on this sooner? So typically when doing the diary study, you want to constrain it. So if I say you're doing 3 days of interactions, maybe I give you 5 days to complete this. And the reason for that would be for recall. So you started the class on January 8th, and this assignment wasn't due until the 31st. Part of that was I wanted to give a good long time for students to orient themselves to the system. Also before having to turn things in, just getting used to things slowly. But really this deadline, I started the semester with the flu, and I wasn't... I don't know. I should have made this deadline much sooner. So when I teach the class again, that's what's going to happen. But for this round, it is problematic that I bet a lot of students were sort of trying to make it up, so far into the semester. So I didn't really capture some of the initial orienting activities that could be helpful for the next time I set this up. But perhaps, having waited, or for those students that didn't reflect on their first few interactions in Canvas, maybe I got more of the typical experience, because there's only so much you can do for the person who's, orienting themselves. That's part of the platform, not necessarily something that I can change as the instructor. There's only certain end user modifications that I can do. So, wrapping it all up, I just want to thank everyone for their time filling out that diary study. If you have any questions on this methodology or anything in the class, you can find me on Canvas. I'm also in 238F and in the School of IT and on main campus, and you can also email me. Okay, thank you.